Hi everyone, welcome back to It's a Lot, Let's Talk. I'm Kylie.
I'm JP.
So today we are going to chat a little bit about what happens before crisis and what that looks like for families. Care rarely starts when the crisis hits. It often builds towards it. There's some signs that most families will see in the moment, but not necessarily act on. Maybe they chalk it up to normal aging process or maybe a bad day, whatever it may look like. But there are typically signs before crisis hits that get overlooked. So we just wanted to talk about what that looks like and ideally maybe raise awareness so we can avoid crisis in the future, is the goal.
And yeah, the thing with crisis, I know personally, if I know a crisis is inevitable, I tend to procrastinate more, which is
Hmm.
counterintuitive, but I think it is human nature though. Like if we know something
Interesting.
bad is coming and we got to deal, and maybe this is a male thing, because I know with my family doctor, if I know, I'd rather put it off and not hear the news and deal with it when it actually happens than try to do something beforehand. I don't know what it is. I don't know. Maybe it is a guy thing.
Interesting. It could be personal too, because for
Yeah.
me, if I know something's wrong, I like to fix it immediately. So I need all the facts so I put things in place to cure the crisis. But yeah, we usually think care starts when something happens when that crisis hits, but it actually starts when stability starts to slip. And there are signals or early signals that a lot of people do miss. For these older adults, maybe that's some subtle cognitive changes. So maybe some increased forgetfulness, leaving your keys somewhere, not remembering where they are, or repeating questions, or maybe just some confusion at certain times of the day. And these situations, they can look normal because everyone has forgetfulness sometimes, and maybe these subtle cognitive changes that still do look quote unquote normal, whatever normal really means, but they could actually be something underlying that it could be worth checking out.
Mhm.
There's also some
Yeah.
changes in mobility, some slower movement, or some hesitation when getting up or starting to walk, or maybe some increased reliance on furniture when you're maybe getting up or when you're walking, grabbing onto the railings or the walls, whatever it may look like. And again, that could look normal to a family member and be like, oh, it's a normal sign of aging. But again, something to definitely check out and not brush under the rug. Um, at that point, if you're starting to notice something, if it's caught your attention, you've probably been noticing it happen prior to this first realization subconsciously. So it's definitely something to monitor moving forward. Maybe track how many times it happens, or to your knowledge, seeing it because maybe you're not with your family members all the time, but there's definitely things to look out for in tracking and speaking with your family doctor before this crisis hits, because these are signs that stability is starting to slip a little bit. And
Mhm.
again, sometimes it is just the normal process of aging, and we don't want to discredit that by any means, but it's best to be safe than sorry, in my opinion.
Yeah, no question. And I know personally, there was one that kind of slapped me in the face before my mother, and I kind of chuckle now because in hindsight's, 2020, but I recall prior to her diagnosis of having Alzheimer's, she called me over one day and she says, "I need to talk to you." And I go, Mom wants to talk to me. What's going on? So I remember driving over thinking, what could you possibly want? And so I came, knocked on the door. She said, "Come on in." And she goes, "Sit down. I have something to say to you." And she goes, which blew me away. She goes, "It's okay. I moved on and I know you paid me back, but I know you stole $50,000 from me." And that
Stole
that was my reaction.
$50,000?
$50,000. So she said 50,000, and I could
JP.
I could picture this like right now. She's sitting in the chair because she had these pink chairs, like high back chairs, and I said, "Mom, what are you talking about 50? Well, I know at the time, you took the $50,000, but I know you paid it back, so I just needed to tell you about it, get it off my chest. And I said, Mom, what are you talking about? I said, show me the documents where, I withdrew $50,000 from your account. We actually went upstairs to her thing. Oh, I can't find it right now and so forth. But, I kind of laugh at it right now, but at the time it was really upsetting. And I didn't
Yeah.
understand why she was thinking this or how this got into her mind and so forth. And it seemed like a bit of extreme, but it most likely had something to do with her impending Alzheimer's, condition. So that was the kind of first step, but I chalked it off. We left. She said, "Oh, I forgive you," and all of that. I'm going, "Forgive me for what?" So we hugged, we kissed, whatever, moved on like a good son would. But that was just, one of the symptoms of her
Yeah.
condition that was coming on that I never made the connection with. Because prior to that, everything was fine. She was just,
Right.
nothing had kind of stood out. Everything seemed to be normal and so forth. And then it kind of escalated to that where we had a relationship when I didn't see her, we'd call once or twice every couple of days. And she
Hmm.
started to call me every day.
Yeah.
And then not only did she call me every day, she started to call me multiple times on the same day. And then it
Right.
got to the point where we kind of clued in what was going on. It was unavoidable. She'd call me like 15 times in a row. And about the seventh time, she would say, why don't you ever call me? And I'm thinking, I just spoke to you 6 times before that. But it gradually got to that. But the point is, these things are always happening that we're not necessarily aware of. And I
Right.
think, what does that mean if we become more aware of that? How does that help us and so forth? I think it would have helped me from a emotional, psychological perspective. Like I
Hmm.
would have understood what we're going through. Maybe it's not me, the bad son who stole $50,000 from his mother, right? It was what was happening to her. So,
Right.
as you were talking about those different kind of symptoms, it kind of really resonated with me.
Hmm. And I'm sure at the beginning, speaking of the phone calls, at first you probably didn't think much about her calling you every day because things are changing, right? Like everyone's growing older and whatnot, and maybe she just wanted to connect a little bit more. But when I
Hmm.
got to those
Hmm.
15 calls a day, and then repetitive calls or
Oh,
repetitive topics, and why don't you ever call me?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and that raises concern, right? So it's prime example of sort of showing how things can be misconstrued as normal, or wanting to connect more over the phone if you don't see her all the time in person or whatever it may be. So, yeah, wow.
Yeah, and it started out not recognizing, hey, like, whoa, where is she coming from? I've taken money from her to
Yeah.
regular calls. And even when the calls started to increase, um, the question became, well, what do I do with this? You know, I
Yeah.
could talk to her family doctor, talk to a geriatrician, talk to whoever, but how do we prepare for the inevitable? Because it's most likely only going to get worse. And
Right.
even though it was happening in the moment, wasn't sure how to respond to this. And I think part of it was I didn't want to accept the fact that her mind was going, and two, I didn't really know how to prepare or how to respond. And I'm sure more people out there, experience the same thing. And like I said before, I had the luxury of having family members in the healthcare system, so we kind of knew, but I couldn't
Right.
imagine not having that connection and knowing what to do.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I can imagine even if, say, again, going back to the phone call example, if you just ignored that last call, you probably feel that guilt for a long
Mm.
time, like, oh, I ignored her call. She thinks I'm a bad son. I probably stole 100 grand this time, like
Right.
whatever
Absolutely.
it may be. But yeah, that's a huge, huge, I hate to use the word burden, but like truly it is a burden on the caregiver, or at that time you just the son, not even a caregiver at that point. And that can lead to your increased stress,
Yeah.
frustration, guilt,
Yeah.
sudden emotional toll on you that you weren't used to, and sort of almost a role reversal of now you have to
Hmm.
worry about your mom, where you're used to your mom worrying about you, I guess
Yeah,
you could say. Um,
totally.
was that a moment for you that it was like, oh no, like I'm now we're in the thick of it? Like, did you feel like that was a crisis moment for you, or did it still feel like normal, not urgent, but not stable anymore?
Yeah, yeah, great question. And in the time again being a guy, putting it off, oh, it's just a bad day or making excuses for it. But you kind of know what was going on. I
Yeah.
knew when it really registered with me that there was no turning back, that we're heading towards crisis or we're in crisis was she calls me up one day and she goes, my smoke detector's not working. Could you come
Hmm.
take a look? Okay, come over, take a look. And her smoke detectors were dual. It was battery operated, but it's also plugged into the electrical.
Yeah.
And I came over. I see the smoke detector, and she had 8.5 foot ceilings. The smoke detectors detached. You could see the live wires sticking out and the battery kind of hanging down. I go, Mom, what are you doing? Oh, I was beeping and I didn't know how to stop it, so I had to take it apart. I said, Mom, please don't go into that. Like you're gonna get electrocuted. Let me go to the store. I'll get a new one and I'll replace it. So sure enough, I went out, replaced it. I said, okay, we're good, right, Mom? Yeah, right, Mom. And this was maybe 2 years after she accused me of stealing 50,000. So I had a greater sense, that we were heading in the wrong direction. Next
Mhm.
day, sure enough, I get another call. Oh, my smoke detector's not working. I go, what do you mean your
Yeah.
smoke detector's not working? Anyways, long story short, I go over, same thing. She had taken this one down and said it wasn't working. So I had to go buy a second one and put it up, but this time I put a sticky note. So, it was
Right.
it was an indicator. I think that was the moment that I know there's no return.
Right.
This is, it could only get worse from here.
Right.
And it was scary. It was getting dangerous and all those types of things. So that was the huge symptom or the marker that made it real for me.
Right. So almost like that crisis moment, you knew you needed more
Absolutely.
support. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's hard to come to. I'm sure you noticed a lot of things that before, between the 50 grand and the smoke detector.
50 grand. Yeah. Absolutely. Some things
I,
I picked up on, some things I didn't. Yeah.
right, of course, of course. And you're not necessarily looking for those signs, right? Like we always say, you don't know what you don't know, but often what families will do during the phase is monitor without acting. And I obviously don't know if that's what you did during that point because you noticed things, but not fully grasped, sorry, so I'm not gonna chalk it up to monitor but not acting. But yeah, it is normal to notice things and then normalize the changes and sort of say like it's
Mhm.
just aging, or you try to manage it independently. Um, but ultimately taking that next step and preparing for what is to come, because it's inevitably gonna come, is probably the best plan of action at that point. Instead of waiting for a clear incident, for you, you're lucky there was no safety issue involved in the smoke detector. Like that would have been a clear incident, or a fall, or a hospitalization, or anything like that. So. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. A lot of people avoid this formal sense of care and asking for help, or they try to take it all on themselves. But reality is, like we've spoken about many, many times before, is people have jobs, they have kids, they have lives outside of caring for their parents or whoever it is they care for. You can't necessarily be there 24/7. It's hard.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I recently, I'll touch on this just briefly, but I recently heard a story about a woman who had to quit her job to care for both of her parents at the same time because her mom was deteriorating, but then her dad started to deteriorate and he was the primary caregiver. So the daughter ultimately had to quit her job in order to care for her parents
Mm.
because she had no flexibility in her work at all. And it's
Mm.
truly heartbreaking to hear because you get to
Mhm.
these points of uh, you're noticing these changes in your parents, but there's no formal care. Like that could be
Hmm.
subsidized, sorry, is what I'm trying to say. If you were to go to the hospital, they'd say monitor the changes, but they're not calling Ontario Health at Home to say, hey, they need help because they have these subtle changes. No, that's the point where you're in waiting until a crisis happens so you can get that formal care from the
Right.
hospital or Ontario Health at Home, which is it's hard, it's sad, it's tragic, it leaves a lot on the children, the unpaid caregiver, and it's
And that's
not
the thing, like you said, it's the if come, like if it would have almost been better saying she's going down this path for sure, and
yeah,
she's not going to be consistent, and we got to do something about it. Health at home, or as you mentioned, or pay, pay out of pocket. But it was moments of clarity for her, and then moments of just whoa,
yeah,
she's not with us today. And those in betweens is what's hard. You'd go see her, and she'd be absolutely fine, and you'd leave, and you get a phone call a couple hours later, and something's totally wrong. And
right,
I think again, knew it was happening. Maybe I didn't want to accept it because accepting that your mom is not going to be the same person again, and that's really tough.
yeah,
Um, but then doing something about it, and what can you do? Like you said, navigating the system is just like, over like it's daunting, like what you have to
right,
go through and when it happens. And it's not only that it's daunting, you can kind of figure it out, especially with nowadays, but the pace in which it moves is not necessarily in the pace in which you need to deal with the situation that you're going through.
right. And then how do you get to that point of knowing when you need care? Like your
Right.
parents could still feel completely independent and you think they need care and you send someone in and it's useless. Should
Hmm.
not useless, but I'm sure that the parents think that they don't necessarily need care at that time, but I don't know, there's this like back and forth that you could go. Do they need care? When do you put care in? At what point is right? At what point is wrong? And without that formal guidance that often only comes when crisis hits, what do you do?
Right.
So,
Right.
but I mean,
And we go
sorry,
ahead.
go.
I was just gonna say, as an aside, we never said the three-letter word, and the three-letter word that my mom hated the most was PSW. Because
Oh,
we
what?
recommended that, and I'm independent. I can take care of myself. I don't need anybody. So we realized we weren't going to fight it. We weren't going to win it because we did have PSWs come in, but she'd just kick them out. We had to disguise them. We got creative.
Right.
This is
Yeah,
somebody
of
here just to help
course.
me and so forth. And
Yeah,
anyway, but it's interesting how, like you said, the independence when the independence of someone is challenged.
yeah,
I know with at least my mother, she'll go to the ends of the earth to kind of avoid that type of thing. So
of
it was
course.
an interesting and stressful experience.
Absolutely. And there has to be that healthy balance of when you're accepting care into your home, how much the practitioner does for you or for your parent and how much they let you do yourself. So
Right,
oftentimes they could just be there for companionship, but there's a lot of stuff that they could help with. But if they are fully independent, you still need to give them that independence and that autonomy to continue to increase and manage their quality of life. Because if the PSW is coming in and doing everything for them, they're going to start relying on the PSW no longer able to do the tasks that
right.
is necessary for them. But
Mhm.
there is definitely absolutely 100% benefit in practitioners getting into the homes earlier.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
But
Yeah, the
your response
necessity.
scared me a little.
Oh yeah, believe me, that was our goal to always do that. It
Yeah.
was just interesting how she resisted that, and we had to kind of package the
Yeah.
practitioners differently. I'm curious to get your take on this. We were thinking, assisted living because she couldn't live on her own and she was a single woman and that. And we looked into, long-term care homes. We looked into other places. We looked at our budget, financial and so forth. But I know long-term care home, just getting on the list would have taken forever and we would
Yeah.
have been in kind of flux. But what's interesting in terms of her segue into long-term care home was a crisis. We took her
Right.
to the hospital when she had an infection, and we brought her into emergency, and then it kind of, she went through the process, or there she ended up, long story short, staying in the hospital for a little bit of time, and then from the hospital she was transferred to LTC. So my question to you is, why does the system seem to only respond to crisis?
Hmm. Yeah. I mean,
Because it is interesting, right? Like you're thinking, okay, I need to get some help right away. I need to
yeah.
focus in on this. But just she gets an infection and then she's acting erratically and all of that. And then she gets admitted to the hospital
Right.
and we get the help we need. She has no choice. And then she gets access or gains entry into the long-term care system.
Right. I mean, I have no simple answer for why the system only responds at crisis, but what I can say is that for some reason, support only gets triggered when someone's needs reach a certain level. And I don't know what that threshold might look like, but it's definitely the access is threshold based.
Hmm.
Um, and for obvious reasons, budget, whatever it is, but there is things that we can be doing to prevent these crises from happening. So we reduce hospitalizations and reduce rehospitalizations even, and it's a very reactive model. It's it's designed to respond
Hmm.
to issues, to crises, to events, not to it's not designed for gradual change. It's not designed to almost prevent these hospitalizations, which you would think that it would be. You would
Right.
think that you wouldn't want people to have to go into the hospital. And a lot of the times, these older adults are going into the hospital for reasons that are not reasons to go to the hospital. It's
Mhm.
I mean, you hear stories of an older adult walking into a hospital needing care, but really they just need social engagement. They just need someone to talk to. They think something's wrong, but it's really just maybe they're having a bad day or whatever it is. But there's also some like fragmentation in it in the system. There's no single point of coordination. There's no one you can just contact and
Hmm.
here's the loot or here's the route you're going and talk to this person and talk to that person and talk to this person. It's all separate. There's no streamlined system. There's huge gaps in care. There's huge gaps in conversations. And even when you talk to one person, they're not getting the information or sorry, you talk to one person and then you're pointed in the right direction of someone else, but that other person doesn't get the information prior. So
Yeah, yeah. You're
there's
seeing it all
disconnected
over again.
providers. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's such a there's a lack of streamlining for sure.
Yeah, and what I notice when like the hospital, the system, when you're
Hmm.
in there and there's a crisis, they kind of react because they have to do something. Like you reach
Yeah.
that third threshold, whatever that threshold is, varies from. I'm sure there's a constant, but it varies from situation to situation. And I know, in Ontario here, it's aging in place, aging at home, whatever they call it. But when a crisis happens at home, there's no way, there's no immediate reaction to it. So you're in the system. She went to the hospital. She's part of that system, and there's a crisis. They deal with it. But as you had the similar crisis at home, there really wasn't, or it seemed there wasn't anybody to kind of turn to that could immediately respond. Hospital setting, immediate response makes sense. You're in that environment. You're there. Home setting crises, gets locked out of her home, forgets things,
Mhm.
pulls down the thing. It's a long, drawn out process. It's almost like those two concepts are completely separated. And I
Yeah.
always find that interesting in light of the fact that, we're promoting this aging at home. We want people to age at home for a number of different reasons, right? But yet when there's a crisis in the home, there's seems like there's very limited immediate support.
Yeah, there is.
Right. Versus the hospital, which makes sense. You're in that environment, support kind of comes right away. So I always find it interesting between the juxtaposition between those two. We had to
Yeah.
wait till she entered the hospital before and have a crisis before, something or people acted on it.
Yeah, that's interesting. And yeah, I guess when you are at home, the crisis response team you would call is 911. If there's an emergency,
Right.
you call
Right.
911, you go to the hospital. So then you find yourself in the hospital, maybe not necessarily needing to be there, but that's what you do. That's who you contact. And if you're not at that threshold, you're not receiving the care that you need, and it's potential to happen again, the same situation. So the system is definitely built to respond when something breaks down. It's not there to prevent it and
Mhm.
sort of stabilize and provide support before there's a crisis. So
Right.
you don't get to that point. So you can monitor prior and you can sort of track changes, and it's not put on the entire family to have to worry about all the time. So
Right. Right.
yeah, and
I'm only thankful that, and it was done inadvertently, having conversations with my mother throughout the years and saying, what happens if you lose your mind, or, you get Alzheimer's,
yeah.
whatever. What do you want to happen? And we kind of talked about it that way and kind of reviewed it that way. So, but in hindsight, if it was, and we kind of knew, well, we didn't know, but we sensed because her sisters kind of, a couple of her sisters got dementia and Alzheimer's. So we know
Okay.
there's a possibility. But had we prepared for it, would have lessened our psychological hardship a little more. And looking back, I think absolutely. Like, here's a plan. If we start recognizing these symptoms that are cropping up, and there's something that we could put in place that makes sense at the time, would that have helped? And I like to say that it probably would have.
hmm I also wonder if you implemented, not saying that you did anything wrong by saying this, I'm just genuinely curious if you implemented or introduced home care sooner, like
Hmm.
before things started to go downhill. I wonder how your mom would have responded to then having a PSW. And because you said that she did not want a PSW to come in at all. So I wonder if when she was cognitively aware, if you said, "Hey mom, like let's implement this now. Let's see how like just have her come over, have some coffee, or like maybe she can help you fold laundry while you talk, whatever it may be." I wonder how she would have responded then when she was having those bouts of delusion.
I think, and good point. I think she would have at least been able to rationalize
Maybe.
having that in place in a reasonable way versus
Yeah.
to the point where she wasn't able to rationalize. So there's no logic meant nothing. But earlier on, logic would have been. So yeah, it would have been interesting. It would have been an interesting, if I can go back and do it again, an interesting experiment to kind of figure that out. And not even painting it as, this is a PSW and they're here to take care of you. It's
Yeah,
a
like a friend.
PSW, it's a friend and they're here to help you out in situations. Let's see how it goes. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Even helping with groceries, helping with different
Right.
types of errands around the house and so on. Yeah, absolutely. Or even cleaning, you know,
Right. Yeah, that's
simple as
huge
that.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Helpful
Yeah.
always.
I think it would have made a difference always, no matter what, whatever state you're in.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So yeah,
absolutely.
I agree with
Yeah, well, most care crises are not sudden. They are gradual. They happen over time, and usually care is not implemented until there is a clear cut point, a clear crisis that happens. You put into the hospital, or you have a fall, or something happens. But care is super unpredictable. And unfortunately, things don't always go as planned, but preparing for it as best as possible is most ideal. So,
it. Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah.
Cool.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us today on It's a Lot, Let's Talk.
Thank you, everyone. I'm just thinking back again what I could have done differently with my mother. Maybe that's
No,
why I
no,
got
no,
distracted a
no.
little. But no, in a good way. In a good way, because I think moving forward, this is things that need to be talked about. So,
Right,
okay.
absolutely. And things need to be put in place, but the breakdown is much bigger than the
Yeah.
people involved. The breakdown is the
Absolutely.
system, we know.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Okay, well, thanks everyone. Thanks for listening to this episode of It's a Lot, Let's Talk. If something in this conversation resonated with you, we'd really appreciate you sharing it with someone who might need to hear it too. Make sure to follow along so you don't miss upcoming episodes. We will be continuing these conversations and unpacking more of what care really looks like. And as always, if this is something you're going through, you're not alone. We'll see you in the next one.